Hello and welcome to the Polkadot Ledger Integration AMA. Thanks for coming wherever you are in the world. Everyone, I'd love to see where we're checking in from. So if everyone wants to send their city and or country over in the chat, I always like to see where everyone's coming in from. So it is noon Eastern time here in New York, where I'm at. We got Joe Petrowski in Zug. We have Fabrice in Paris, I believe. Yes. And Carol Ann is in Berlin. So we got 4 spots represented so far, but excited to see where everyone else is coming in from. Just to start off, I wanted to go through some of the rules. If you saw the tweet, there is a chance to win a Polkadot engraved ledger, which Carol Ann is here to show off. There, if you can see there, they've been engraved with "It's Getting Dot" in here. Yes, our lawyers said that was okay to put on these ledgers. So the first couple folks who ask a question right here in the Ask a Question section, we have 51 questions already. We've got a set of questions we've put together, sourced from our Twitter communities to start out with, and then hoping we have time for 5 or so questions from the folks here in the chat in the Ask a Question section. So you'll have a chance to win that ledger live, which is that ledger, very exciting. But let's get into the AMA. I wanted to introduce Fabrice Dautriat, who's head of core integration at Ledger, and Joe Petrowski, who is a technical integrations lead at the Web3 Foundation working on Polkadot. So Fabrice, if you could just give a brief introduction to yourself and Ledger.
Yep, sure. So hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today, Peter, Joe. I've been working at Ledger for 2 years. I'm in charge of coin integration, which basically means blockchain support across all Ledger products. So today I'm very happy to be here with you and discuss more about our latest integration, so Polkadot, and I will be answering many questions, I hope, challenging ones maybe, so we'll see, and I'm once again very glad to be here.
Thanks very much. Joe, what do you do at Web3 Foundation?
What do I do? I am the protocol integration lead here, so I lead most of our technical integrations. So for Polkadot, getting support from people like Ledger for staking, governance, all these kind of features that we want to develop in the Polkadot ecosystem for Polkadot, Kusama, and a lot of the parachains in our ecosystem.
Amazing. So starting off, Fabrice, we've got a softball here for you. What is Ledger?
Oh, what is Ledger? Well, Ledger is a company, and we are focused on building security and infrastructure solutions to safeguard critical digital assets and for many blockchain applications out there. So the company was founded in 2014, and basically what we do is that we offer through 2 products, the hardware wallet and Ledger Live. We offer an easy gateway to the crypto ecosystem. So Ledger Live, that you can see here on mobile, for instance, was launched something around 2 years ago. And right now, you can do many things with it. You can, let's say, create accounts on many different blockchains, 27, if I recall correctly, manage tokens, send, receive funds, but also through our partners, you can do buy, swap crypto, sell them if you want to. And so eventually, we'll have many more crypto services, and yeah, the latest that we added is Polkadot support. So quite an interesting blockchain, challenging, complex, but I hope that people will give us interesting feedbacks on the UI, the UX, and probably questions. So happy to deep dive.
You provide a perfect segue there to get into the first question for Joe, and why the Ledger Live integration is so exciting for the Polkadot community. Polkadot's particularly complex. So Joe, I know a lot of folks here know about Polkadot a bit, but if you could give a brief overview about what's so complex, unique, special about Polkadot, and why it's going to become increasingly important for an interface like this to actually interact with the network.
Yeah, so Polkadot is really complex, as you guys said, and it's really kind of like a next, like the next stage in blockchain development. So if you kind of take like Bitcoin as like phase one, where it's like, let's all share a computer program, like an individual application together, into Ethereum, where it's like, well, let's not just share a computer program, let's share a computer. Polkadot is kind of the next step, where it's just like, well, sharing a computer is kind of, that computer gets really crowded and congested. Let's just give you a way to develop your own computer and deploy it into this network. And so since we do have that like new abstraction, there are a lot of it is just more complex, and you can't really map the same concepts that you might understand from other blockchains into Polkadot. There's a lot of stuff that's just fundamentally new. And so that takes, when you have something like Ledger Live and you kind of have to force it into a user interface that people are familiar with, well, how do you make that like a good experience? That's really difficult. So I would say like the unique things about Polkadot, like, yeah, we have these parachains where people can have their own blockchains, which would be comparable to like a layer one blockchain. These can specialize in things like smart contracts. So they could be like a generalized computation platform, or they could be more specialized, more of like an application where it's like, we have just this parachain that it only does identity services, or like only does Oracle stuff, and doesn't actually allow this general computation. And then like kind of along that, we switched to proof of stake. So we have this nominated proof of stake model, and also like quite a sophisticated governance process of how we actually manage all these complex things, like staking and parachains, and kind of how the protocol will evolve over time.
Yeah, so obviously a way more places where users, stakeholders engage with different aspects of the network. You mentioned like governance being a big part of it, and actually really having control over the network. And then, yeah, this idea that there's all these parachains, there's now potentially dozens, hundreds of new layer one blockchains that are going to be able to be built and launched on Polkadot. So you can see where engaging with the network can become a bit of a confusing experience for new users. So Fabrice, with all this understood, like we're all learning a new paradigm in blockchain architecture and technology here, what can you do with your DOT on Ledger Live? How does Ledger Live help users engage with the network in a better way?
Yeah. So what we wanted to do is really to provide an easy user interface for people managing their dots. So you already have Polkadot.js, which allows you to do a lot of things. So we had to make choices and provide you, let's say, I would say the basic features, while still having the ones that may be of interest to you. So what you want to do is definitely create an account. So you can create not only one, but several accounts, as many accounts as you want, actually, on Ledger Live. And then you can receive funds, send funds. That's really the basic feature, I would say. But then what you can also do is that you can bond these funds and nominate them up to 16 validators, if I'm correct. And doing it, what you're actually doing is that you are helping secure the network through nomination. I would say the unique thing that you can do with Ledger on this part is that you are actually self-custodying your asset. So you are your own bank, and doing it, you are really in control of your funds, and you have the freedom of selecting whatever validators you want from a list of validators available. So today, this is the scope of features that you have. Of course, you can unbound and stop nominating if you want to, and that's it for now, at least.
Unmuted. Thank you very much. So Joe, a couple of questions that have come up along the way as folks have gotten used to staking and nominating on Polkadot. Is there a minimum amount of DOT you need to stake? And what is the sort of like roadmap for this feature?
Yeah, I actually just saw this pop up in the chat here on Crowdcast. So there wasn't like ever an actually like imposed minimum in the code where anybody said, you need to have this much in order to stake. The reason for the current minimum and why it kind of fluctuates is in some sense a victim of Polkadot's success. We have like, I think 8,000 nominators now, and there are a lot of networks out there that don't even have like 8,000 addresses on them. And we have 8,000 just addresses who are nominating on Polkadot. And when a validator actually submits the new election to say like, well, this is going to be the validator set for the next 24 hours, they have to put that into a block and say, here's 300 validators, and they all have 100 or 150 nominators or something that's kind of pointing at them. And so we have this list of like 300 validators with all the nominators on them. And when you have 8,000 nominators being applied to all of these validators, the whole list like actually just literally cannot fit into a block because it gets just so long. And so we're actually taking a lot of steps to mitigate this and bring down that minimum amount of DOT. So something we're working on right now is that rather than having to submit this entire result in just one single block, one of the validators can say, hey, I have a solution to this, but I can't fit it all into one block. So I'm actually going to submit just maybe like 1/3 of it into this block, and then 1/3 of it in the next block, and then 1/3 of it the block after that. And then the system will kind of like store those as they accumulate. And then at the end, after the validator has submitted all of its chunks, it can say, okay, now here's our entire set of nominators to validators, and then everybody would be included in that way. I don't want to make promises on timelines, but I'm thinking in probably the next like 1 to 2 months that will be sorted, and the minimum will go down from like the current. It kind of fluctuates around like 100 to 150 DOT. That should go right back to only 1 DOT needed to stake. So it's something like we have a lot of people who are like actively working on it and trying to fix it. It was never like an imposed thing where anybody said, oh, you have to have some minimum. It just because it was so successful, there's so many people who want to actually participate in this that it got a little bit congested.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Crypto.dog with 2 G's. You win the first prize. So Carol Ann or Emily, if you could just make a note, crypto.dog with 2 G's has won the first ledger. But for everyone else, I see a lot of questions going in the chat. That's awesome. Please, though, if you have the click a little plus button, it switches it to ask a question. If you could please submit the actual questions that you have into the ask a question module and then upvote. We're going to answer the questions that are most upvoted by the folks here in the chat. So please submit your question there. Vote for the ones you're interested in, because those folks will be the ones that are answered as we get through these preset questions. So some of those questions might be answered already in the preset questions. We'll be sure to get a ledger to the folks who had the foresight to ask the questions that we were going to be answered anyway. But yeah, please make sure you get your questions into that ask a question module rather than just the chat, because that we'll be able to organize them better, and folks will also be able to see them on the replay. Thank you, Joe. So where were we? Fabrice, there isn't enough storage on my Nano S for the DOT application. Why? What can be done to fix this?
Yeah. So this is indeed one of the first comments that we received after we released the integration, and that's a fair comment. So maybe to answer, first of all, you have to remember this is not a standard USB key. This is relying on secure element technology, so it's definitely not designed to have a big storage available. So that's the first part. Maybe the second part of the question, second part of the answer, sorry, would be you can always uninstall application all the time. You can uninstall and reinstall application at will. Your funds are safe. They will not move. They are still there. And each time you reinstall the application, you will see you will see the addresses and the balance being correct again. I tried this morning. I could install the Bitcoin and the Polkadot application, but yes, indeed, that's quite a strong limitation. The Nano X doesn't have this limitation because the storage size is bigger, but we do hear the complaints, and we are working with the developers who actually designed the application to try to make a light version of this application. And to give you a bit of context, if I have the time, the reason the application is so big in size is because the Polkadot protocol allows for many operation types. And the team that actually built the application, the Zondax team, they included all the operation types into the application. So increased security, because you can check every type of operation you do, but of course it requires more storage. So this light application that we're working on, I don't have a clear timeline on it yet, but for sure it will have to contain at least the most used and the most widely used feature. So we're working on that. I'm hoping we'll have something. I will say, like Joe, 1 or 2 months, something like that. So hopefully by then you will be able to recover a bit of room on your NetOS.
Awesome, thank you. Next question is also for you, Fabrice. How do you secure data on the Ledger Live app? Not the device itself, but the app.
So, okay. I'm not sure I'm getting the question right, so I will try something. But security itself is coming from the nano, so from the device, but that's not the topic of the question. Securing data on Ledger Live, the Ledger Live application is running on your computer or on your mobile. You're basically executing it. Ledger is not running it for you. You are running it for yourself. So you are responsible for your own data, but the data that are actually in Ledger Live are coming from the blockchain. So there is nothing really to secure. It's secured by the blockchain itself. Your complete list of transaction history is secured on the blockchain. Now, if the question is more about the privacy of the data and how we ensure that these data are private, once again, you are running the Ledger Live software on your laptop yourself. You can actually use a password to encode it locally, but all the data that are visible are coming from the blockchain itself. They are public. So if the question is Ledger tracking users and trying to just know how many dots I store and everything, we are not doing it. Actually, we don't know who you are. You are an address on the Polkadot blockchain. That's the best we can do, and we don't even do that. So there is no password, login, email. So basically, what we can monitor maybe is the usage. Is there a lot of people, and by people I mean devices maybe, but we don't actually check any data. So I'm not sure I got the question answered. So if it's not exactly this, that was the topic, feel free to comment. But on our side, we are not monitoring anything.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day. It's like, just basically know how many people are in the room rather than who they are.
Exactly. And that's mainly for performance reason. If many people want to check their data at the same time, we need to have servers to be able to sustain the load, basically.
Yeah. Cool, thank you. Joe, you're up next. What are the differences between staking on Ledger Live and in a Polkadot web wallet like Polkadot.js? And there's a couple of sort of sub questions here. But let's start with the overview, the high level.
Yeah, so on chain, it's really indistinguishable. It really just fully comes down to the user interface. So, we've had Polkadot.js apps for a long time, and there's quite a few other wallets out there that have been developed by the community that have staking features. So they all have their own user interfaces, and Ledger is really just another option. So if you've been staking with a Ledger on Polkadot.js apps, definitely a little bit different experience. You couldn't really fully take advantage of the Polkadot.js kind of like normal user flow because the Ledger app didn't support batch transactions. But yeah, I think like the apps, the Polkadot.js website is kind of geared toward people who have their accounts like in their browser or on their computer, and it designs the user experience around that. And it was possible to use on a Ledger, but not really designed for that.
That was the sort of second sub question. Can I access my account on both if I have a Polkadot.js staking setup running now and I get a Ledger? Can I sort of manipulate and touch from both interfaces?
That might be actually a question more for Fabrice, because it's certainly technically possible. I don't know how much of that has been implemented in the user experiences.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
no.
this question was, so it's sort of three that are grouped together under that same general bucket. So like, can I access both on both interfaces, or am I locked into one or the other? Can I use both at the same time? Can I use my Polkadot.js stash account on Ledger Live? So similar general gist of questions, in a little bit of the minutia though.
So I would say if you are using your Nano to connect through Polkadot.js, we did our best to be able to detect that account. Now, Polkadot.js is very flexible. You can select what is called a derivation path. So you can basically select any derivation path you want. And on Ledger Live, this is, of course, a big problem, because if you can select any you want, we cannot guess which one it is. So we have to have some kind of logic to scan accounts and to try to detect your account. And so far, I think we are doing it quite correctly, but it's possible that we do not detect your account. But if we do not detect your account, we will suggest you to create another one, in which case you can just transfer funds and everything will be back to normal. You had a question about stash and controller. Indeed, here again, we had to make a trade-off, and Ledger Hubble Wallet is very secure. So we took the decision, we made the decision to have the stash and the controller exactly the same. So I believe if you have different stash and controller accounts, we will tell you, and we will tell you that this can cause problem if you're using it with Ledger Live. One of the feedback that we received is there any way for us to have a quick button to restore everything back to the way it's supposed to work on Ledger Live? So far, it's not possible, but I believe this option is possible through Polkadot.js. So depending on the usage that you have, you might go through Polkadot.js to restore a different configuration or to change it a bit. Or if you are a super technical user, I would say Polkadot.js offer you way more flexibility, probably.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so then the next question is also in the same vein. If you're a user that is staking through a ledger on Polkadot.js, how do I get that over to Ledger Live? You sort of started to touch on this.
Yeah, well, you should just, you add your accounts. So basically you plug in your device, you open the Polkadot app. If you were using a ledger before, and if you nominated through Polkadot.js, in theory, we are supposed to detect it and recover the information from the blockchain and just show it to you. The only problem that we may have is to find your accounts. I think the team is working on improvement to be able to scan different derivation paths, but there is a limit to this logic. At some point, we cannot scan everything. But we should be able to detect most of the accounts created. I mean, if you didn't change the default configuration, I suppose it should be okay.
Great, thanks. New sort of topic. Again, for Fabrice. Will we be able to interact with other projects through the Polkadot application on Ledger Live? I believe this is specifically sort of asking about, once parachains come online soon, there's going to be sort of another level of interacting with those parachain tokens. Some of the parachains will also have their own staking economics as collators. So are you planning on supporting those parachain projects as well?
So right now, we don't have it in the roadmap. And as you said, it's not launched yet. So we have to, let's say, to keep monitoring it. We are actively monitoring the Polkadot ecosystem, I will say, and we'll see what comes out of it. Definitely, if there is a lot of demand for that, and if it makes sense, probably we'll be looking into it a bit more. But for now, no plans.
Yeah. So everyone, make sure to let Ledger know that you would love them to support parachains. At your favorite parachain project, obviously, at the top of the list. Joe, got a couple is it possibles for you. Is it possible to auto-delegate validator feature required?
No, because every time you change your nominations, you need to sign a transaction. So if your ledger is not actually connected, then you won't be able to sign the transaction. I think that's what auto-delegate validator is asking, to update that kind of on a daily basis. But no, nomination was supposed to be an active participant in the network, and not kind of totally passive. So it's up to you to choose the validators that you want to put your stake behind.
Is it possible to reduce the unbonding time to at least 14 days?
Well, as we say, everything's possible through governance, right? It's certainly possible. I don't think it's advisable. The 28 days was chosen for the security of the network, and although inconvenient, it's also for the benefits of you, the holder.
Thank you. Is it possible to claim reward to any time rather than on the schedule that is in the system?
So rewards get claimed whenever somebody triggers it for a validator. So I think we have some talks about kind of like deferred rewards. So like being able to kind of claim them all as like a single batch for a 6-month period or something, rather than, every time somebody calls this payout function. But that's still all kind of like in the idea, talk about it phase. And for now, it's just whenever somebody calls the claim reward function on the validator that you are nominating that era.
Thank you. Fabrice, next question is for you. I guess a little bit out of the weeds on the specifics around staking, and more general about working, integrating Polkadot, sort of the what we started off talking about at the top, where there's a lot to do here because Polkadot is a complex protocol. So what was the most difficult thing when integrating Polkadot into Ledger Live?
Interesting question. Many things were challenging. I think the general answer would be the trade-offs that we had to make that were maybe not perfect, but we had to make them in order to release the Polkadot support. Maybe I can give you an example of such trade-off. The first time I used dots, I used the Polkadot application through Polkadot.js. I had only 2 dots, and I wanted to send some dots to one of my colleagues at Ledger. And doing it, I tried to send 0.5, couldn't do it because I needed to activate the recipient account. So I sent 1. And by sending 1, I got some kind of error. It was not possible. I had to change this setting, the transfer keep alive function. So I tried because, who knows? So I just switched it and I sent 1 dot to my colleague. Of course, sending 1 dot is 1 dot plus fees. And the result was that my balance was below 1 dot. And I burnt, because that's the protocol rule, the remaining dots I have, something like 0.9. So this was quite a stressful and confusing experience for me. And so we had to discuss internally, what do we do? Do we allow people to send an amount resulting in their balance getting below 1 dot and possibly getting burnt? So all of these trade-offs, and that's just one example, were kind of difficult for us to make. So we had to deep dive into the protocol, discuss with Joe quite a few times, get a lot of people feedback, beta testers, alpha testers at Ledger. So in the end, we make some trade-offs. They are probably not perfect. So we received already quite a few comments. The minimum bounding is one of them. The ability to empty my account is one of them as well. Keep in mind, when we started working on the integration, the dot value was not the same. Now I can totally get people want to empty their account. So the priorities are changing with the protocol, with the market, with everything. So we're to reassess. And once again, your comments are really more than welcome, because that's how we will make the right decision.
Yeah, Joe, people are applauding the concept of dusting accounts in the chat. Do you want to give a little bit about why those design decisions were made?
Yeah, so it takes up space on the blockchain at all these accounts. So every account that exists is taking up some storage. And if you want to get like a little bit technical here, when you have like kind of a database structure, when you go to find one of these accounts, you have to kind of go through these layers. And so every layer can, in Polkadot, it's times 16, but like every layer, to make things simple, say like times 2. So if you go from like, say having 63 accounts on your blockchain to having 65 accounts, you've kind of gone from like past this power of 2, 64, and you add an extra layer where you have to keep searching in the database to get to where the accounts actually are. So if you have all of these accounts that have, dust value in them, then every time somebody else goes to make a transaction, when we have to find their account in the database, we have to jump through more of these layers, which slows down everything else. So having these like dust accounts in the blockchain actually slows down the experience and raises the fees, increases congestion for everybody. So Polkadot just kind of says, well, if you want Polkadot to store your account, you have to have, you know, some recognizable minimum value to Polkadot that Polkadot understands. And this just helps kind of like, you know, keep the state smaller and make sure that the state that the blockchain is storing is actually like really valuable.
Yeah, and anyone who has experience in the Ethereum community, like me, both on the technical side, on the user side, on the governance side, you may remember a lot of back and forth around the concept of state rent being implemented to help deal with this state bloat. There's a decent amount of pruning that happens to keep the size of the state down, but generally speaking, it's to make sure the chain runs efficiently. And one of those design decisions Polkadot's been able to implement from the start, because we've seen how damaging that really sort of heavy state can be on networks like Ethereum. Fabrice, you're up next. What are the specificities of Polkadot compared to other coins you are already integrated into Ledger Live? Was it more difficult than integrating Tezos or Algorand, for example?
Mm-hmm. The protocol itself themselves are very different. On Tezos, you delegate an account, the entire account, and the funds are not locked. They are kind of liquid. On Algorand, you don't delegate anything. It's delegated by default. So that makes these two protocols are way easier, probably, at least from a user perspective. Technically, maybe not. It really depends. But I would say, Polkadot, we said it earlier, is probably one of the most complex protocol and challenging one we added. On top of that, you can change the rules by governance. So for us, it's also a maintenance challenge, because each time there is an update, we need to be ready to move some part of the codes if needed. So now that Joe said that there is no minimum or one dot minimum for the reward possible through nomination, well, we'll have to reassess what exactly we should do on Ledger side. Should we warn the user, explain it, update documentation? So there is quite a serious number of tasks that we will have to take care of in the following weeks, months, and probably years to support the protocol evolving.
Yeah, so the follow-on to that is just generally speaking, and I think we've gotten a decent idea about the amount of work that goes into integrating a new coin. So like, why does it take so long? It's not like, I feel like it's like you don't, not like you do one and now they're all like snappy, right? It's the same amount of work every time, basically, or more.
It's a fair question, because people imagine that, we take some code, plug it in, and it works. It's definitely not this way. Each protocol is fairly specific, so we have first to understand the protocol itself, and that takes time, just for us to really understand how it works. Then you have the coding part, the effective indexing and things like that. But you have the UX that we have to take care on. We have to define what is the best user flow, the best information you need, all the documentation part of it. Then the QA, we go through an alpha test and a beta test with some beta tester through our beta tester program. There are, I would say, you can count it as at least 3 months of pure development, plus all the product and project management stuff on top of that. So in the end, it's always challenging. We're getting used to it, and the Polkadot team was really great helping us answering questions, technical questions that we had. So at least on this part, it was great.
Great, yeah. So we 3 months-ish of development time to get the thing in a place where it's ready to be tested and released. So what's the process look like before the official release? Like, the last, say, couple weeks before we get to here today, what's the auditing, testing, all that look like?
Yeah, so I think Joe participated in the beta testing program. So we have this testing phase where we open a Ledger Live build to anyone actually from the beta tester program. You can try the product, give us feedback, what's good, what's not good. At this stage, usually we don't have many bugs. Because before the beta testing, we have an alpha test where we internally at Ledger, we tell people, hey, please come and play with the latest version, try it. Maybe you will earn something that, we try to incentivize our own colleagues to play with the product. And yeah, we get some feedbacks, we correct it. There is this back and forth that can last a few weeks. Then there is all the communication and the actual release plan. So I would say between the moment we have a product kind of ready and the moment it's shipped, we can probably add at least 1 more month.
Awesome. Thank you. Joe, will the DOT account I created show up on Ledger Live, or do we need to create a new one? I think we sort of touched on this, but might as well answer it directly.
Yeah, so I think like Fabrice said, they're exploring some options to add like the same derivation path that you used in Polkadot.js. Likely the easiest thing to do is to create a new one. That's kind of like goes through the normal Ledger Live user flow.
Awesome. Thank you. Fabrice, this is an easy one. When Kusama?
Well, easy one to ask, not so easy to answer. Me. Yeah, it's easy for you. I discovered Kusama and Polkadot something like a year and a half ago. And by that time, I just thought, maybe naively, that Kusama was a testnet. It's not just a testnet. It's way more than that. So we understand it. I think many projects will probably launch on Kusama and maybe not on Polkadot. So there will be this, let's say, maybe not parallel, but other ecosystem. So we are looking at it. There are probably some technical parts that are quite similar between the way you interact on Kusama and Polkadot protocol. But still, on our side, it's 2 different blockchains. So it means it's, once again, a full integration work, months of developments, QA, and everything. So I would say, like for parachains, tell us what you think. Is it something that we should be looking into? And yeah, probably we'll be looking into it in the near future.
Great. Yeah. So I imagine that there's a similar answer to this next one, and we've also sort of touched on it. But will Ledger Live, we talked about the staking, we talked about the ability to send transfers, create an account through Ledger Live. But Polkadot, Joe's pointed to this before, anything can change via governance because the stakeholders control the network. So will Ledger Live be integrating governance features to allow Ledger Live users to directly engage with network referenda or voting for counselors through the app?
So for now, this is not something we are working on. Here again, the real question is how many of dot holder will actively participate. This is an information I honestly don't have. It's something that would be fairly interesting for us to understand. Yeah, I mean, eventually what we want to achieve is to have this kind of, crypto hub where you can do anything. And so if this is one of the main features from the protocol, eventually it should be supported. So the question is more when, and I don't have the answer to this question. Sorry about that.
No worries. We'll keep a close eye on it. And as more and more folks engage with the network, engage with governance, like you said, it'll become clearer as to whether or not it's going to be worthwhile for y'all to put the work in to ensure that that's in the interface. So beyond what we've talked about, I think we've covered quite a lot of grounds so far. For Joe, are there any other benefits or updates users might expect to get from managing their Polkadot engagements through Ledger that you see sort of above and beyond what they have today?
Yeah, I mean, so what comes out now is a great start, but I guess to kind of backpedal on the last 2 questions, I hope that what comes out of this is more ecosystem support. So support for Kusama, governance, and then a lot of our parachains. So the Ledger Live user experience is really good. So I hope we can extend that to other features and other teams in the ecosystem.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We've gotten through the questions that we've sourced from our communities on Twitter. So now we're going to get into the questions in the questions and answer box. So last call for votes to get your question or the question you want answered up into the top 5 to 10, which we should be able to cover here in the last 20 minutes or so. So the first one, I'll throw a little disclaimer on at the top. We can't comment directly on anything related to potential returns or yields of DOT or any other network that Ledger supports. But that said, I think we can still answer the question without going into any sort of specifics. Joe, if you wanted to take this one in terms of like basically should users expect to see anything different in terms of the economics of how Polkadot works by doing it through Ledger Live versus other solutions?
Right. So that should actually be exactly the same. So the nice thing with Ledger is that you are staking your own DOT in your own account and choosing validators like of your own volition. So in that way, it's exactly the same as using Polkadot.js apps or any other application. So it all comes down to what validators you choose and how well they perform.
Luis Rosales, you get a Ledger. The second question, how is staking on Ledger Live different to staking Polkadot on an exchange that offers staking services? Say, for example, Kraken is a fairly popular exchange that does offer this service. I think Fabrice has a good answer here.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and it comes down to what Joe was saying. With the Ledger, you are self-custodying your assets, so you really own the dots. You have your own private keys. You do the on-chain operation of nominating yourself. You can choose the validators. Whereas when you keep your dots on an exchange, they will probably nominate, but on your behalf. So in the end, I would say it's a question of freedom of choice. Do you want to actively participate on the network yourself? Do you want to be to engage in the network security, kind of? So it's really a personal decision, I would say. What we want to do at Ledger is to offer you the ability to do these kind of operations.
Yes, not your keys, not your coins. At the end of the day, Ledger gives you that security. So Christopher Miller, you get a Ledger. It's getting dot in here.
Yeah.
Next question. Is different address controller support going to be added so I can manage my staking without having my Ledger nearby?
Usually today, through Ledger Live, you only do operations using the security of your nano. We don't allow operations to be broadcasted or signed using a key that is not from the Ledger hardware wallet itself. So if I understand correctly the question, I would say we made the decision to have Stash and Controller the same because both relies on the nano security. If you want to have some kind of hot wallet where you don't need a hardware wallet, that won't be included in Ledger Live because it works with the hardware wallet. I think this option is available on Polkadot.js. I'm not sure, so I will defer to Joe on this one.
Yeah, being able to set a different controller. Yes.
Awesome. I'm going to try not to butcher your name, Ionaris. You've won a Ledger Live. This question's from Casimir has sort of been answered, although I guess it's maybe even a little bit more nuanced. So we already know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's interesting. Is it a possibility that in future DeFi projects on Polkadot can be managed and executed from Ledger Live? So I will make the note here, and this goes back to sort of some of the commentary that Joe had earlier on how the Polkadot really is a new architecture. So right now we're talking about Polkadot staking, or the relay chain staking, being the main feature that you're able to manage through Ledger Live and your relay chain accounts. But then there's the parachains, right? So these layer 1 blockchains connected to Polkadot. We've gotten the answer from Fabrice that it's not currently in the works, but as the Ledger Polkadot community asks for parachain teams to be supported, it's certainly something that they will potentially respond to. But then there's the application layer on top of all that, where there could be a DeFi project building on a parachain like Moonbeam or Akala that you'll also want to engage with through your Ledger Live. So now we're getting down to that third level of like builder, or I guess the end user integration. So I expect I know what the answer is going to be, Fabrice, but have you put more any thought into like getting down to that application layer engagement with Ledger Live on Polkadot?
So yes, we are thinking about a way to be able to interact more deeply with the apps in general. In particular, whether it is Moonbeam or another project, we are not focused on that specifically right now. What we're focused on is try to build a way for any kind of project to actually be integrated. So I would say the short answer is no, not right now. The long answer and the nuanced answer is we are trying to figure out a way to be really more open to this kind of integration. So this is, let's say, a work in progress. I cannot comment much more than that for now.
Thank you. The next question, BH, I believe, has been answered. It also looks like reaching out to Ledger support might be in order for you to help find your accounts on Ledger Live from Polkadot.js. So I'm sure someone from the Ledger team can shoot you a link or an email address in the chat where you can reach out and get some more one-on-one help for your specific issue. But yes, you also want a Ledger. So what we also sort of answered this, but maybe we can expand on it a bit. So beyond the standard staking options that you have available in Ledger Live, is there anything sort of like extra features that you're thinking about adding for staking on Ledger Live for Polkadot?
Extra features, but related to staking specifically.
Yes. So we sort of talked about this before. It's like we want Polkadot, at least Polkadot at the protocol level. Maybe frame it this way: Polkadot at a protocol level, the staking engagement it's been designed so that it's an active participant role where you have to go in and shift around your nominations based on the validator set that you want to nominate, who you trust, where you think you're going to get the best outcome. But if you're using Ledger Live or any other sort of interface that sort of gives another way to interact with the network, theoretically, Ledger could build a tool that allows you to like automatically, dynamically change your nominations. So like, not saying that's on the roadmap, but have other options like that been thought about or considered?
Well, I won't say we've been considering it because it's just my perspective, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's an on-chain operation, and the security model that we have with the Nano is what you see is what you sign. So in theory, we could create an app that allows to sign blindly new nomination operation and somehow shift or change the nominators you're nominating to, the validators you're nominating to. But that's really not aligned with our security model. Our security model is the user should be the one finally making the call, checking on his screen, I'm doing this. If we allow you to somehow do things while you are not in control, we are opening the door to security risk. So that would be my answer. So we are not really considering it because of security mostly, but I understand it could make sense maybe from a reward perspective, but it's trade-off security rewards. I don't know exactly what needs to be chosen here.
Thank you very much, Christopher Miller. You get a Ledger. The next question from Sam Worley is on the data breach and around whether or not Ledger has tightened security. There's been quite a lot of chat around this issue in the chat, both answered by the Ledger team and a couple folks in the community. So I think the Ledger team has a good amount of material out there that they'll also add again into the chat. But then just broadly speaking, this is not a concern to the Ledger device or the Ledger app itself. It was not a security exploit of the actual crypto infrastructure. It was a third-party data breach of customer data, which has been tightened. And the Ledger team again can drop the full recap and next steps they've taken on that in the chat to answer that question for Sam. You also get a Ledger. Pablo, first of all, thanks to Ledger for integration of Dot. I love to see all my portfolio grows in the app. So we sort of also answered this. I don't want to say again, we don't want to directly discuss anything around like, you know, maximizing returns or anything else. But this was sort of the idea that you could dynamically shift around your validator set to generate the best outcomes for your DOT. Generally has been answered as if the community wants these sorts of tools built into Ledger or elsewhere, ask for them and then find a team to build them. There's lots of opportunities for these pieces of infrastructure to be built out. Pablo, you also get a Ledger. Can Ledger create an active, inactive tab for validators so once DOT is bonded, you can stake more efficiently? Are we paying fees? We are paying fees only to have inactive validators? Does the question make sense to you, Fabrice or Joe?
So if I understand the question correctly, I think, okay, now I see it. The tab is probably to ask us somehow to differentiate validators that are somehow eligible for reward and those that are not. I think from our side, it's fairly complex to manage. What we could do is probably add some kind of warning, like this validator is oversubscribed. I don't know if the word is correct. Joe, correct me, please, if I'm wrong. But the inactive or active part is probably not related to the validator itself, but more to your nomination. So in this sense, we cannot proactively tell you if it's going to be active or inactive. So I'm kind of confused by the question, but at least there are some improvements that we are working on the UI side to help you avoid, let's say, doing something that is definitely not in your interest. But then everything related to how to maximize your interest is fairly complex for us to manage, and it's definitely difficult to implement.
Got it.
So like the nice thing with nominated proof of stake is that you could have 15 inactive validators and one that's active, and your stake will get applied to the active validator. It's not like your stake is being just evenly distributed amongst all of the ones you nominate. It will actually, like, Fragment method will allocate your stake in the most optimal way, and it's not going to like just leave your stake outside of the election. It's definitely going to use it. I think some people get confused with the inactive active thing because your nomination doesn't actually take effect until the next election, which takes place at like I think from like 11:21 to 11:36 UTC every day on Polkadot. So basically, like, you have to make this nomination before 11:21 UTC for it to get counted. And then, like, so you might have this period where, you know, this hasn't been accounted for yet, but like the next day when the election takes place, it will become active. So, but validator sets are fixed for 24 hours, so you're not going to see it immediately. But if you choose 16 validators and one of them is active, then your stake will definitely be active.
Thanks, Joe. We're getting into the 1 and 2 vote questions, so I get to go through and pick the ones that I think are particularly interesting. This is a higher level Polkadot one that I think Joe can answer quite well. Can you explain why the shared or pooled security that Polkadot uses is preferable to the model that BTC, Zcash, ETH use?
Yeah, so I think like BTC, ETH, and Zcash are all kind of like single chains, and they were never really designed to interact with other chains. So I think when we compare those, we're kind of comparing, you know, like proof of work to proof of stake, or like, you know, maybe different variants of proof of stake to each other. Where pooled security comes in is like, what happens when different blockchains want to actually interact with each other? So if we kind of go into like a proof of work model, if Bitcoin wants to interact with Ethereum, or maybe you should choose two that use like similar hardware, like Ethereum and Zcash. Like you can mine Ethereum and Zcash using the same GPU cards. So if Ethereum and Zcash want to share information and like make transactions over a bridge between each other, they actually have to trust the lower of the two hash power networks, because you could imagine like, well, if Ethereum has maybe, I don't know, 10x more GPUs dedicated to it than the Zcash, well, if you want to trust a message from Zcash, you also have to kind of trust the Ethereum miners not to just take, 10% of their hash power and go try to attack Zcash. So that, like, you can kind of see the complication with just two chains. When you want to have like 100 chains or 1,000 chains interacting with each other, and chain A uses some application on chain B, which uses some application on chain C to D to E, etc. You actually end up with this big network where one vulnerability in one chain, or like one chain attacking another chain, can actually have these ripple effects that affect other applications. And so in order to actually operate without having to think about, well, I'm using this chain, what blockchains are they using, and needing to evaluate the security of all of those, you actually just get this one common standard where you are all sharing the same execution context, and you know that everybody you interact with actually has the same guarantees that you do. And you don't need to worry about those chains being attacked and like 51% attacked. In proof of stake, it's a little bit different. It's not a 51% attack, but some sort of like stake attack, depending on which variant of proof of stake you're using. So really, like, shared security, like in a like maybe shorter way, it actually is like, it's more like shared context. Like, it's letting you execute transactions and interact with people in a shared context where you kind of understand the information that you're making your decisions on, and that information is sound.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. We got just a couple minutes left here, and I think that this last question would be a nice one to wrap it up on, because it brings us back to part of the reason why user interfaces and growing the validator community, the community that's engaged in staking and securing the network, is important. This person asks, Ethereum has around 33,000 validators. How many network validators will Polkadot need to be deemed sufficiently decentralized? So at the top, I will note Ethereum doesn't actually have 33,000 validators, in the sense that, like, you could run one Polkadot validator with many dot. There's a sort of arbitrary restriction on Ethereum validators that say you can only run 32 ETH in a validator, so that an individual might run 1,000 validators themselves. An individual might run 10,000 validators themselves. It isn't. It doesn't mean that Ethereum is more decentralized. It really comes down to the number of ETH and the overall value of the ETH in that proof of stake network that qualifies it as sufficiently decentralized. But Joe, with that said, we're looking at Parachain auctions going live soon. We're looking at scaling up Kusama and Polkadot to 1,000 validators. Can you just give a little bit of the thinking about why 1,000 validators with many nominators is sufficiently decentralized for Polkadot, and why potentially Ethereum made this sort of arbitrary decision to lock a validator into 32 ETH?
Yeah. I mean, well, I can't comment on, I guess, Ethereum's rationale there, but I can comment on like a few aspects of this 1,000 validators goal. So we have some like really cool research about like availability and validity, and basically the way in Polkadot, like you say you have like 100 parachains, right? The validators kind of like split up. So if you have 1,000 validators and 100 parachains, then you're going to have 10 validators per parachain, and they all get together, like 10 validators per parachain, and they execute the state transitions of each parachain. So this is kind of like why they're literally parallel chains. You have 100 groups of 10, and they're all executing different blockchains in parallel and reporting some result to the relay chain, like a block header, and saying like, hey, we got this block header from a parachain. We actually executed it and checked it, and it's valid. Of course, 10 is a pretty small number, and you don't really want them to collude. So we have like a couple of defenses against that. Like, they're randomly selected every single block. So it's not like 10 validators just kind of hang out on a parachain and are always there. They shuffle every single block. So you might validate one block here, and then you get moved to a different parachain for the very next block, whole different group of 10. It's not like you're traveling with the same group of 10, just they're constantly shuffling. And they're also sending out information just in case they ended up in a random group of 10 where they actually did all know each other and wanted to do something malicious. They also have to like send this information out to all the other validators in the network, and they get kind of like randomly double checked. And so we kind of settled at this like 10 validators per parachain number, because like our analysis showed that you would basically last, like if people tried to, or validators tried to attack and like submit an invalid parachain block basically constantly, like all the time, then it would take 50 years for them before they would just, probabilistically speaking, not get caught doing it. And if you get caught once, then it's a 100% slash. You just lose everything. Like for saying that something that's invalid is actually valid. So you can imagine nobody's really going to be able to try this for 50 years. I mean, if you get caught once, you are out, and very low probability. So that's kind of how we settled around this like 1,000 validators goal that we'd want to support 100 parachains. And then as far as like sufficient decentralization, we just want like adequate stake behind that validator set and have it spread as evenly as possible, so that we don't have like some validators with like a lot more stake than others, or really the problem would be validators with less at stake. So like people might know, like we do have like some entities that run multiple validators because you want to kind of have like the minimum stake possible. So how do we prevent them from actually like, having 10 validators and just getting together on a parachain and doing something malicious? Well, our slashing actually kind of scales based on number of validators that do something wrong. So if one validator makes a mistake, it's kind of like, well, this one guy made a mistake, but that's not really like a threat to the network or something, because everybody else, 999 of them did the right thing and kind of like spotted this. But if 20% of the validators do something that it looks like some funny business, this is kind of getting close to like the thresholds where we're saying like, actually, like this wasn't just an innocent mistake, this looks like a coordinated attack, and the slash actually gets much higher. So the people who do run multiple validator nodes actually do take on significantly more risk should they make a mistake. So that kind of like pushes the incentive to maybe like be a little bit more risk averse and nominate some of the validators who don't have so many nodes running.
Amazing. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Fabrice. Thank you, everyone who attended and asked questions. If you want a ledger, you will get an email, I believe, through the email address that you registered on Crowdcast with. So you should hear from the team soon. Appreciate it, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.